everybody. I am so sorry if you can hear me for being late. It is technical difficulties, but as you know, if I am late, I am here at the computer. I had my screens go black again. I have bought myself an external hard drive, and hopefully I haven't kept anybody waiting, and anybody who was waiting, hopefully they'll come back. So tonight, I may not be able to set myself up to see chatters in the chat space because, and I'm also skipping my usual, the more professional opening and end screens with the theme music because my computer just can't handle it. I am going to take the last day of this month because it's going to take me a couple of hours to transfer things out of my hard drive, but this is Tuckin' and Chill, and I feel like it's been a while since I've done this. I think since YetiCon. I haven't been back to do this. So let's see here. I'm going to try to make some room on my screen. Nope. I'm going to see what I can do here to shorten this up. Nope, that's not cooperating with me. But we haven't been in this particular bedroom. This is my favorite bedroom and my favorite nightie for this Tuckin' and Chill. And I picked something that probably a lot of people know. There's been lots of movies and books about it, but it's part of the public domain. And I'm going to read the version or the copy that I have for it. And I'm going to take it from there. Now I'm experimenting with different mediums today, and I'm using more than one thing to try to do it. And in talking to Hero Flame, I did try to create a visual backdrop like I have done in the past for one other of my creepy stories to help people visualize the stories that I'm reading to you. I've tried to find things that move a little bit sometimes, and other times there'll be still screens, but still, if you feel like getting comfortable, laying back, have your cup of hot or cold water, tea, coffee, whatever soothes you, and if you feel like closing your eyes and just listening to my voice, you're welcome to. I really like that in Tuckin' and Chill can be my voice to your ears. And also, in doing this, it is my hope that you'll fall asleep, because that was the point of this. When I first started with this show, the whole point was that so many of us are insomniacs, we really need help to sleep, and I wanted to help people get to sleep and hope that by the end of the show, maybe I'd have some sweet dreams too. But we shall see. So I am still trying to adjust my screen, and again, my biggest complaint is I need bigger monitors. There's just no room. No, hello, how are you? No, if you really are the age you tell me you are, I don't know if this story will be too scary for you, but if you're ready, go get yourself a drink of water or get yourself comfortable, lay back, and I'm gonna tell a creepy story. Are you ready for that? Okay, this creepy story, and hopefully it will help you fall asleep, is called The Monkey's Paw. No, this may be scary for you, so I'm just warning you in advance. Are you sure you want to hear this? Because I'll have no mercy for you once I begin. So you'll have a choice of either watching my screen, and I'll have some background pictures sometimes with a bit of movement, to help you visualize this story. Okay, we don't need to hear about that, thank you. Alright, that I don't want to see that word in my message feeds if you don't mind. Okay, I'm going to start to tell my story. So I'm going to switch the screens now, and you'll see me again later. So here we go into Storyland. It's called The Monkey's Paw. Okay, it looks like they're not going to play for me, so I'll just speak the story. The night was cold and wet, but in the small parlor, labyrinth villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Father and son were at chess. The former, who possessed ideas about the game involving radical changes, putting his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils that it even provoked comment from the white-haired old lady knitting placidly by the fire. "Hark at the wind," said Mr. White, who, having seen a fatal mistake after it was too late, was amiably desirous of preventing his son from seeing it. "I'm listening," said the latter, grimly surveying the board as he stretched out his hand. "Check." I should hardly think that he'd come tonight," said his father, with his hand poised over the board. "Mate," replied the son. "That's the worst of living so far out," bawled Mr. White, and suddenly an unlooked for violence. "Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live in, this is the worst. Pathway's a bog, and the road's a torrent. I don't know what people are thinking about. I suppose because only 2 houses in the road are let, they think it doesn't matter." "Oh my." "Never mind, dear," said his wife soothingly. "Perhaps you'll win the next one." Mr. White looked up sharply, just in time to intercept a knowing glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he hid a guilty grin in his thin gray beard. "There he is," said Herbert White at the gate, banged too loudly, and heavy footsteps came toward the door. The old man rose with hospitable haste, and opening the door, he was condoling with the new arrival. The new arrival also condoled with himself, so that Mrs. White said, "Oh, tut, tut," and coughed gently as her husband entered the room, followed by a tall, burly man, beady of eye and rubicund of visage. "Sergeant Major Morris," he said, introducing him. The sergeant major shook hands, and taking the proffered seat by the fire, he watched contentedly while his host got out whiskey and tumblers and stood a small copper kettle on the fire. At the third glass his eyes got brighter, and he began to talk, the little family circle regarding with eager interest his visitor from the distant parts, as he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of wild scenes and doughty deeds, of wars and plagues and strange peoples. 21 years of it," said Mr. White, nodding at his wife and son. "When he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him." "He doesn't look to have taken much harm," said Mrs. White politely. "I'd like to go to India myself," said the old man, "just to look round a bit, you know." Better you were here," said the sergeant major, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass and sighed softly. He shook it again. "I should like to see those old temples and fakirs and jugglers," said the old man. "What was that you started telling me the other day about a monkey's paw? Something? Morris?" "Nothing," the soldier said hastily. "Lastly, nothing worth hearing." "Monkey's paw?" said Mrs. White curiously. "Well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps," said the sergeant major offhandedly. His 3 listeners leaned forward eagerly. The visitor absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips and then set it down again. His host filled it for him. "To look at," said the sergeant major, fumbling in his pocket, "it's just an ordinary little paw dried to a mummy." He took something out of his pocket and proffered it. Mrs. White drew back with a grimace, but her son, taking it, examined it curiously. And what's there special about it?" inquired Mr. White, as he took it from his son, and having examined it, placed it back upon the table. "It had a spell put on it by an old fakir," said the sergeant major. "A very holy man. He wanted to show that the fair ruled people's lives, and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it so that 3 separate men could each have 3 wishes from it. Oh, his manner was so impressive that his hearers were conscious that their light laughter jarred somewhat. Oh. Oh. Well, why don't you have 3, sir? Said Herbert White cleverly. The soldier regarded him in the way the middle-aged wont to regard presumptuous youth. I have, he said quietly, and his blotched face whitened. And did you really have 3 wishes granted? Asked Mrs. White. I did, said the sergeant major, and his glass tapped against his strong teeth. And, has anybody else wished? Persisted the old lady. The first man had his 3 wishes, yes, was the reply. I don't know what the first 2 were, but the third one was for death. That's how I got the paw. Ugh. His tones were so grave that a hush fell upon the group. If you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you now, then, Morris, said the old man at last. What do you keep it for? The soldier shook his head. Fancy, I suppose, he said slowly. I did have some idea of selling it, but I don't think it will. It's caused enough mischief already. Besides, people won't buy. They think it's a fairy tale, some of them, and those who do think anything of it want to try it first and pay me afterward. If you could have another 3 wishes, said the old man, eyeing him keenly, would you have them? I don't know, said the other. I just don't know. He took the paw, dangling between his forefingers and thumbs, suddenly threw it upon the fire. Shh! Wait! With a slight cry, no! Stooped down and scratched it up. He tried to dust it off. Better let it burn, the soldier said solemnly. If you don't want it, Morris, said the other, then give it to me. I won't, he said to his friend doggedly. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it on the fire again like a sensible man. The other shook his head and examined the paw. It was like it was a possession. He examined it very closely. How do you do it? He inquired. Okay. Hold it up in your right hand and wish out loud, said the sergeant major. But I warn you of the consequences. Sounds like the Arabian Nights, said Mrs. White, as she rose and began to set the supper. Don't you think that maybe you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me? Her husband drew the talisman from his pocket, and then all 3 burst into laughter. The sergeant major, with a look of alarm in his face, caught him by the arm. Look, if you must wish, he said gruffly, wish for something sensible. Mr. White dropped it back in his pocket and, placing chairs, motioned his friend to the table. In the business of supper, the talisman was partly forgotten, and afterward the 3 sat listening in an enthralled fashion to a second installment of the soldier's adventures in India. If the tale about the monkey's paw is not more truthful than those he has been telling us, said Herbert, as the door closed behind their guest, just in time for him to catch the last train, we shan't make much out of it. Did you give him anything for it, Father, did you? Inquired Mrs. Wright, regarding her husband closely. A trifle, he said, coloring slightly. He didn't want it, but I made him take it, and he pressed me again to throw it away. Likely, Herbert said, with pretended horror. Why, we're going to be rich and famous and happy. Wish to be an emperor, father. To begin with, then you can't be henpecked. He darted round the table, pursued by the maligned Mrs. White, armed with an attaché case. Mr. White took the paw from the pocket and eyed it dubiously. I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact, he said slowly. It seems to me I've got all I want. If you only cleared the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you? And Herbert put his hand on his shoulder. Well, I'll wish for 200 pounds, then that. I'll just do it. Father, smiling shamefacedly in his own credulity, held up the talisman as his son, with a solemn face, somewhat marred by a wink of his mother, sat down at the piano and struck a few impressive chords. I wish for 200 pounds, said the old man distinctly. A fine crash came from the piano, greeted with the words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. Ugh! His wife and son ran towards him. It moved, he cried, with a glance of disgust at the object that lay on the floor. As I wished, it twisted in my hand like a snake. Well, I don't see the money, said his son, as he picked it up and placed it on the table. And I bet I never shall. It must have been your fancy, father, said his wife, regarding him anxiously. He shook his head. Never mind, though. There's no harm done, but it gave me a shock all the same. They sat down by the fire again while the two men fished out their pipes. Outside, the wind was higher than ever, and the old man stared nervously at the sound of a door banging upstairs. A silence unusual and depressing settled upon all three, which lasted until the old couple rose to retire for the night. I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bag in the middle of your bed, said Herbert, as he bade them good night. And something horrible squatting up on top of the wardrobe, watching you as you pocket your ill-gotten gains. He sat alone in the darkness, gazing at the dying fire, and seeing faces in it. The last face was so horrible and so simian that he gazed at it in amazement. It got so vivid that a little uneasy laugh he felt on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. Shh! His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a little shiver, he wiped his hand on his coat, and he went up to bed. In the brightness of the wintry sun next morning, as it streamed over the breakfast table, he laughed at his fears. There was an air of just prosaic wholesomeness about the room which it had lacked on the previous night, and the dirty, shriveled little paw was pitched on the sideboard with a carelessness which betokened no great belief in its virtues. I suppose all old soldiers are the same, said Mrs. White. The idea of our listening to such nonsense. How could wishes be granted in these days? And if they could, how could 200 pounds hurt you, father? Might drop on his head from the sky, said the frivolous Herbert. Moore said the things happen so naturally, said his father, that you might, if you so wish, attribute it to coincidence. Well, don't break into the money before I come back, said Herbert as he rose from the table. I'm afraid it'll turn you into a mean, avarice man, and we shall have to disown you. His mother laughed and, following him to the door, watched him down the road, and returning to the breakfast table, was very happy at the expense of her husband's credulity, all of which did not prevent her from scurrying to the door at the postman's knock, or prevent her from referring somewhat shortly to retired sergeant majors of bibulous habits when she found that the post brought a tailor's bill. "Oh, Herbert will have some more of his funny remarks, I expect, when he comes home," she said as they sat at dinner. "I dare say," said Mr. White, pouring himself out some beer. "But for all that, the thing moved in my hand, and I'll swear to it." "You thought it did," said the old lady soothingly. "I say it did," replied the other. "There was no thought about it. I had just... What's the matter?" His wife made no reply. She was watching the mysterious movements of a man outside, who, peering in an undecided fashion at the house, appeared to be trying to make up his mind to enter. In mental connection with the 200 pounds, he noticed that the stranger was well dressed and wore a silk hat of glossy newness. 3 times he paused at the gate and then walked on again. The 4th time he stood with his hand upon it, and then, with sudden resolution, flung it open and walked up the path. Mrs. White was at the same moment placed her hands behind her, and, hurriedly unfastened the strings of her apron, put that useful article of apparel beneath the cushions of her chair. She brought the stranger, who seemed ill at ease, into the room. He gazed at her furtively and listened in a preoccupied fashion as the old lady apologized for the appearance of the room and her husband's coat, a garment which he usually reserved for the garden. She then waited as patiently as she could permit for him to broach this business, but he was at first strangely silent. I was asked to call," he said at last, and stooped and picked a piece of cotton from his trousers. "I come from Mon Megan's." The old lady started. "Is anything the matter?" she asked breathlessly. "Has anything happened to Herbert? What is it? What is it?" Her husband interposed. There, mother," he said hastily. "Sit down and don't jump to conclusions. You've not brought bad news, I'm sure, sir." And he eyed the other wistfully. I'm sorry," began the visitor. "Is he hurt?" demanded the mother wildly. The visitor bowed in assent. "Badly hurt," he said quietly, "but he's not in any pain." "Oh, thank God," said the old woman, clasping her hands. "Thank God for that. She broke off suddenly as the sinister meaning of the assurance dawned upon her, and she saw the awful confirmation of her fears in the other's averted face. She caught her breath and turned to her slower-witted husband, laid her trembling old hand upon his. There was a long silence. "He was caught in the machinery," said the visitor in length in a low voice. "Caught in the machinery," repeated Mr. White in a dazed fashion. Yes." He sat staring blankly out the window, and, taking his wife's hand between his own, pressed it as he had been wont to do in their old courting days, nearly 40 years before. "He was the only one left to us," he said, turning gently to the visitor. It's hard." The other coughed and, rising, walked slowly to the window. "The firm wish me to convey their sincere sympathy with you and your great loss," he said, without looking around. "I beg that you will understand I'm only their servant and merely obeying orders." There was no reply. The old woman's face was white, and her eyes were staring, and her breath audible. On the husband's face was a look such as his friend the sergeant might have carried into his first action. "I was to say the Mon Megans disclaim all responsibility," continued the other. "They admit no liability at all, but in consideration of your son's services, they wish to present you with a certain sum of compensation." Mr. White dropped his wife's hand, and, rising to his feet, gazed with a look of horror at his visitor. His dry lips shaped the words, "How much?" 200 pounds, was the answer. Ah! Unconscious of his wife's shriek, the old man smiled faintly, put out his hands like a sightless man, and dropped, a senseless heap, to the floor. In the huge new cemetery, some 2 miles distant, the old people buried their dead, and came back to a house steeped in a shadow and silence. It was all over so quickly that at first they could hardly realize it, and remained in a state of expectations, as thought of something else to happen, something else which was to lighten this load, too heavy for old hearts to bear. But the days passed, and expectation gave place to resignation, the hopeless resignation of the old, sometimes miscalled apathy. Sometimes they hardly exchanged a word, for now they had nothing to talk about. Their days were long to weariness. It was about a week after that the old man, waking suddenly in the night, stretched out his hand and found himself alone. The room was in darkness, and the sound of subdued weeping came from the window. He raised himself in bed and listened. "Come back," he said tenderly. "You will be cold." "It is colder for my son," said the old woman, and wept afresh. The sound of her sobs died away in his ears. The bed was warm and his eyes heavy with sleep. He dozed fitfully, and then slept until a sudden wild cry from his wife awoke him with a start. "The paw!" she cried wildly. "The monkey's paw!" He started up in alarm. "Where? Where is it? What's the matter?" She came stumbling across the room toward him. "I want it," she said quietly. "You've not destroyed it." "It's in the parlor, on the bracket," he replied, marveling. "Why?" She cried, and she, bending over, kissed his cheek. "I only just thought of it," she said hysterically. "Why didn't I think of it before? Why didn't you think of it?" "Think of what?" he questioned. "The other 2 wishes," she replied rapidly. "We've only had one." "Was not that enough?" he demanded fiercely. "No," she cried triumphantly. "We'll have one more. Go down and get it quickly, and wish our boy alive." The man sat up in bed, flung the bedclothes from the quaking limbs. "Good God, you are mad!" he cried, aghast. "Get it!" she panted. "Get it quickly and wish. Oh, my boy, my boy!" Her husband struck a match and lit the candle. "Get back to bed," he said unsteadily. "You don't know what you're saying." "We had the first wish granted," said the old woman feverishly. "Why not the second?" "A coincidence," stammered the old man. "Go and get it and wish," cried his wife, quivering with excitement. The old man turned and regarded her, and his voice shook. "He has been dead 10 days. And besides, I would not tell you else, but I could only recognize him by his clothing. If he was too terrible for you to see then, how now?" "Bring him back!" cried the old woman, and dragged him toward the door. "Do you think I fear the child I have nursed?" He went down in the darkness and felt his way to the parlor, and then to the mantelpiece. The talisman was in its place, and a horrible fear, that unspoken wish, might bring this mutilated son before him ere he could escape from the room, seized upon him, and he caught his breath, and he found he had lost the direction of the door. His brow cold with sweat, he felt his way round the table, and groping along the wall until he found himself in the small passage with the unwholesome thing in his hand. Even his wife's face seemed changed as he entered the room. It was white and expectant, and to his fears seemed to have an unnatural look upon it. He was afraid of her. "Wish!" she cried in a strong voice. It is foolish and wicked, he faltered. Wish! Repeated his wife. He raised his hand. I wish my son alive again. The talisman fell to the floor. He regarded it fearfully. Then he sank trembling into a chair as the old woman, with burning eyes, walked to the window and raised the blind. He sat until he was chilled with the cold, glancing occasionally at the figure of the old woman peering through the window. The candle end, which had burned below the rim of the candlestick, was throwing pulsating shadows on the ceiling and walls, until with a flicker larger than the rest it expired. The old man, with an unspeakable sense of relief at the failure of the talisman, crept back to his bed, and a minute or two afterward the old woman came silently, apathetically beside him. My boy. Neither spoke, but lay silently listening to the ticking of the clock. A stair creaked. A squeaky mouse scurried noisily through the wall. The darkness was oppressive, and after lying for some time, screwing up his courage, he took the box of matches, and striking one, went downstairs for a candle. At the foot of the stairs the match went out, and he paused to strike another, and at the same moment a knock, so quiet and stealthy as to be scarcely audible, sounded at the front door. The matches fell from his hand and spilled to the passage. He stood motionless, his breath suspended until the knock was repeated. Then he turned and fled swiftly back to his room, closed the door behind him. A third knock sounded through the house. "What's that?" cried the old woman, starting up. "A rat," said the old man in shaky tones. A rat. It passed me on the stairs." His wife sat up in bed listening. A loud knock resounded through the house. "It's Herbert!" she screamed. "It's Herbert!" She ran to the door, but her husband was before her, and catching her by the arm, held her tightly. "What are you going to do?" he whispered hoarsely. "It's my boy, it's Herbert!" she cried, struggling mechanically. "I forgot it was 2 miles away. What are you holding me for? Let go. I must open the door." "For God's sakes, don't let it in," cried the old man, trembling. "You're afraid of your own son?" she cried, struggling. "Let me go. I'm coming, Herbert, I'm coming." There was another knock, and another. The old woman, with a sudden wrench, broke free and ran for the room. Her husband followed to the landing and called after her, appealing as she hurried downstairs. He heard the chain rattle back at the bottom bolt, drawn slowly and stiffly from the socket, and the old woman's voice, strained and panting. "The bolt!" she cried loudly. "Come down, I can't reach it." But her husband was on his hands and knees, groping wildly on the floor in search of the paw. Where is it? Where is it? If he could only find it before the thing outside got in. Perfect fusillade of knocks reverberated through the house, and he heard the scraping of a chair as his wife put it down on the passage against the door. He heard the creaking of the bolt as it came slowly back. At the same moment he found the monkey's paw and frantically breathed his third and last wish. The knocking ceased suddenly, although the echoes of it were still in the house. He heard the chair draw back, and the door opened. A cold wind rushed up the staircase, and a long, loud wail of disappointment, no, and misery from his wife gave him the courage to run down to her side and then to the gate beyond. The street lamp Flickering opposite shone a quiet and deserted road. And that's the monkey's paw. What did you think, M-Souls? And what do you think of my reading? I hope I'm getting a little better. Now, hopefully you've fallen asleep and I don't want to wake you. But for those of you who might still be fighting the Sandman, or you're fully wide awake, as always I do follow up with one or two things. I can show you one of my sleep aid videos to help you, or tell you some ghost stories. And I know that my viewers, my subscribers, last month really did like the ghost stories because I'm pulling my own from my own things that I've collected traveling and living by myself for so long. And I can tell you something that's happened very immediately. The past 2 weeks, something I got into doing to save money was I bought from a dollar store a whole bunch of these little flat-bottomed, solar-powered garden lights so that when the sun goes down... Hi, King Gabby, how are you today? King Gabby, did you hear any of my storytelling tonight? Did you miss the story? If you missed the story, you'll be able to, after I go offline tonight, by tomorrow you can actually replay this episode of Tuck In and Chill to hear the story. I did the monkey's paw tonight, and I showed it with some visuals to help people visualize it. Now, King Gabby, you left yesterday before I got to know. Are you one of our new subscribers? And if so, thank you very much. I'm glad to see you again. So I was just about to tell a ghost story that I've collected, because that's what I do to follow up for anyone who hasn't fallen asleep during my storytelling. And so, because I'm kind of cheap, I try to save money, I bought a whole bunch of these garden, they glow in the dark at night, they light up with an LED light that's solar powered in the daytime. And I've got them lining the window in my kitchen and the window in my living room, which is directly beside me here. And sometimes they flicker and blink, but for the most part they're pretty steady. And I was swimming in a pool about 2 weeks ago, and a woman who says she's a medium swam up to me. I've never seen her before, and she says, I don't want to scare you, but I have a message for you. And I said, okay. We're treading water. And she says, there's a man following you, and it seems that you didn't get along, but everything's okay now. He just wants you to know. And I said, okay. Do you know who it is? She says, no. I said, is it a relative? She says, no. I said, is it a demon? She says, no, I don't want to scare you, but I just want you to know. That was the message. I said, okay. And I went on with my day. Now, because she had said this, I'm, superstitious. I'm looking around, and when you see those ghost hunter shows, they've got these special flashlights, and they tell ghosts to turn them on or off in certain orders. And so what I've been doing last week, to scare myself, of course, when I'm not streaming live, is I'm looking at these flickering lights, and only one is flickering. And when I go near it and touch it, it would stop. Then I come back and sit down on the wall that is, I do my streaming against the wall that's back to back with the hallway of my building, and it started flickering again. So I said, okay, if somebody's here, turn that off. And it turned off. If somebody's here, turn that on. It didn't happen right away, but eventually it turned on without flickering. I said, okay, whatever. It went back to flickering. So then I said, okay, if somebody's here, and I did this at the beginning of this week, if somebody's actually here with me right now, then I want the one on the left side in my living room to go on and off opposite the one on the right side in my kitchen window, because I can see into the kitchen from here through the doorway. And I want you to go on and off, on and off, on and off, and then over left, right, left, right, left, right. And if that didn't happen, it happened about 4 times, and I wanted to pee myself. I said, okay, whoever you are, leave. You don't live here. But is this the guy? And it went flick, 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 flick again. I said, okay. So the message is, we don't get along. Flick, 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 flick. Well, that's great. I want you to leave because I live here and you don't. I'm alive, you're dead. I pay the rent here. You gotta go unless you want to do my dishes. And that's what I usually tell ghost things that I feel or sense around me if I'm spooked out. I say, go do my dishes, and it seems to end everything. Nobody likes doing dishes. It's the best thing to tell them in the world. Okay? So I went and did the smudging thing with my sister. We got the different sticks of incense and went around everything, opened up all the windows, swept everything from the front door out the back door, and I think everything's okay. And then just 2 days ago, I see a girl I don't see very often. I know she visits the lady who lives across the hall from me. It's an elderly couple and their dogs. And I was talking to her. I said, so do you live here now? You've been here every day for the past week. Well, so I creep myself out, and because I don't know, I'm on the fence about all this superstitious stuff. It could be fairy tales to control us. It could be that there's something else happens with our energy. I just don't know. But if these are just coincidences, I'm using them to freak myself out. But right now, none of them are flickering. I'm just thinking about that. So this girl, not going to say her name, she's about my age. And I said to her, I've seen you a lot this week. Are you living with your parents now? Something happened? Because I usually see her like once a month visiting her parents. And she says, well, so I still have my house, but I don't want to leave my mother right now because 2 weeks ago, my father died. And I shouldn't laugh. That is the old man 2 weeks ago sending me a message that all things are cool. He and I, when I first moved into the building, he has this dog, and every time the dog would see me, the dog would bark and growl and snap. Now, I've grown up most of my life with dogs, but when a dog snaps at me, I don't want to be near it because I don't want to be bitten. And this man would he would never make his dog heel. He'd never trained it. And he would just walk it right into me. So I would be forced away from elevators when I was out in the hallway first trying to get to work on time. Have to take a later elevator. One time I almost was late for that. One time it got very close. It scraped my leg, which I don't appreciate, and I got mad at him. I said, learn to make your dog heel. You don't walk a dog that's biting and snapping at someone into them. And we had a big fight about that. So if there's anything to this, and it's not a crazy coincidence, he passed 2 weeks ago. If it's true, and I mean, I've met 2 mediums in 2 weeks now that I didn't go to. Like, I don't pay to go to tarot or tea leaf readings or anything. I haven't gone to a psychic fair. 2 have approached me in the past 2 weeks to tell me there were messages from the other side. So if there's anything to that, but I didn't get a name from the first lady. I didn't ask her any questions, so I wasn't really thinking about it. When the second one approached me, I thought more about it. But this first one, 2 weeks ago, telling me there was an older man following me, wanting to like hash it out. So I think we're cool now. So I came back and I told my lights to like, okay, everything's cool, making peace now. I always liked the daughter. I never discussed it with the wife. The wife and him never walked with the dog together. She walks the dog now because he's gone. And it was a very sudden thing. He didn't look sick, but he got some infection in his stomach, and he was gone in days because of sepsis. So that's another reason, I'll just say, to change the tone. Drink water, everybody. Sometimes just give your organs a break. I've almost died from sepsis. This guy did die from sepsis. It took him less than a week from the time he found out that he wasn't feeling well. And they couldn't save him when he went to the hospital. He was just gone. 2 weeks ago, the man I had a fight with over a snapping, bitey dog. And I found out from his daughter just 2 days ago. when I saw her randomly in the parking lot. So I sent my condolences over. I didn't tell them anything about this because I don't like spooking people or disturbing real grief with something that could be superstition or coincidence. But if that's not a ghost story, I don't know. It was, I guess, a little bit alarming to me. A little bit sad. Because I'd rather think like when, you think something's happening, but it's just, you can tell yourself it's in your head until the cat or the dog in the room is staring at that space too. So this is one of those moments where it's a bit like a bit unnerving to find out the coincidence 2 weeks. So yeah, that's my personally collected ghost story of the week. That's messing around going on. So I got back into my incense sticks again, and I'm starting to burn them and walk them around the room again just to make sure. And I've got my windows open. Usually just, yeah. So I think that'll be all. I don't think there'll be any more about that happening. Yeah. But, and just to say, to be respectful, I did give my condolences to the daughter and the wife. And in their love story, to end it with that, they were together since they were 14 years old, 60 years. So that's something. And yeah, he came to, make peace, I guess, before he moved on. So there's that. So King Gabby, you're still here. I know you've never been to a tuck-in and chill before. Usually what happens is I might share one of my new sleep aid stories, video I'll play for everybody. I don't have one this week that's new. I've been working more on my affirmations, but things are coming. There will be new ones soon. August will be about that more. And then I tell my ghost stories of things I've encountered in my travels and such, in the lonely places where I've lived. Is there any story you'd like to share with me? And if you like ghost stories, you can go back through my last couple of episodes of Tuck In and Chill. I didn't originally start the show doing that. I started more with leading sleep meditation videos. But we've shifted a little bit to do a bit of both. Because it's a Friday night and it's dark out there. Do you like hearing ghost stories? Some cultures like it. Some people don't like it. Not too much though. You don't have to answer any of my personal questions, but to try to gauge my audience and what would be appropriate to show or talk about next. Can I know are you over the age of 18? Because I found out that someone who joined us recently is not. Okay. Well, I've actually watched a lot of shows and learned a lot about in old houses. You're not over 18, you're younger than 18? Okay. So what I'm going to tell you is this. I actually joined 2 ghost hunting groups in the last 2 places where I live. Okay, I understand. So I'm going to adjust what I talk about for you. You should be in bed asleep. It's almost midnight. Alright, 11. So that makes you about grade 5, grade 4 to 5. Alright, that's a good age. That's a fun age. Well, so the first thing you can do is know that a lot of old houses will creak because of the air pressures of hot and cold air. The outside of the house may be colder than the inside, and so it pushes things to expand and contract, and that makes a lot of the creaking sounds. Another thing you should know is if your house is older, it might have different kinds of old-fashioned wires or old-fashioned pipes made with materials that we don't use anymore, and they may behave in a certain way, again with the air pressures or the hot water and the cold water running inside of them. They can actually make, depending on what kind of wire material and pipe materials, they could make magnetic fields. And here's a trick that I learned. If you have a tap that turns on by itself, don't necessarily think it's anything spooky, because if it's hot water, if you have a washer inside your tap, that's that little piece of metal that makes the water fan out when it comes through the pipe, so that it makes that nice bubbly white color, so it's aerated. It actually, yeah. So if you have hot water in pipes, it actually vibrates. It moves more because the atoms are more excited when they're hot and they're trying to push away and push away, that it actually can take a loose washer and turn it so that the water can come out, relieving its pressure. So that's not anything ghostly or magical. It's science, and it's just from the vibrations. And so if it's warm water leaking, it means your washer might be loose and you just have to call a plumber. Button sounds. So your washing machine keeps making button sounds. Well, washing machines, especially newer ones, they have all sorts of timers on them. That's okay. Have a great night. Sweet dreams. Thanks for joining our channel. Good night, King Gabby. Okay, so today we had No and we had King Gabby. We're going to have to make sure we name our singing monsters after King Gabby once the next set of babies get hatched. We'll have to do that. Have a great night. Alright. So viewers tonight, thank you so much. I'll see you next time. I'll be online on Sunday for Dragonflight. I'll be playing World of Warcraft. I'll see you then. That's really great. Okay, so we have about 3 younger students now in our channel. Bye. I will see you Sunday night. Have fun. So Tucking and Chill tonight has lasted for 52-ish minutes, and I think goodbye. Sleep well. Pleasant dreams. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shut some things down here. Shutting down some programs. You're going to have to hang up first, King Gabby. And I'm just going to put this slide deck to bed. Hopefully I don't lose all the pictures. Yes, I'll see you next time. And you're going to see, if you look in my channel, go to the live tab, it will tell you the schedule. In my community tab will tell you the schedule, and I'm going to be on live next. It'll be Sunday night. Goodbye. And I'm just going to put this. I have other public domain stories, but I found I don't necessarily like them. I'm finding it hard to read some of the older ones. So, but we'll see what I can do with them. What I might do is next week, and I'm not promising, there is a story from 1896 called The Striding Place by Gertrude Atherton. I may choose to read from this, or I'll be looking for something else. But I do have one here that I've had prepared for a couple of weeks actually. And let me see. Oh, and I have another one. Maybe I should make you guys vote on which one I do. There's another one here called The Pale Man. Oh no, I did that one. we've done that one. I'm just searching through my old slide decks to make it. I think we've done everything in a slide deck. Awesome. Okay. Just double checking. That is done. So that leaves me with, since it's almost, I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to play any videos, sleep aid videos tonight, but you guys know where they are. Get some sleep with V&M Soul. And I haven't been topping that one up, but I will be soon. There are things in the works. I dedicated different sections of the summer months, July and August, for different things and different themes. So far I've been able to keep up with my goals. And I'm just going to wish you all well. And I will see you all Sunday Night Live for Dragonflight. Enjoy my playlist if you'd like to hear from me before then. Take care, everybody. This is Venus Callida, signing off.